If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Tonight's guest is Brian. Brian, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. We just appreciate you being here. Brian, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
Newly retired, well, not too newly retired, spent 36 years working in the healthcare industry. Various many other things that I've done could fill 10 lifetimes, I think. I live in a very small village in Ohio, and that's where I've had my experience.
Working in the healthcare field as long as you did you rub elbows with any people who worked in the mental health side of the health field, i.e. people you could lean on if your encounters that we're going to talk about tonight became too much for you to deal with?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, that's a definite perk then. In our first conversation, Brian, you told me that when you see a dogman, it has a way of changing your view of the world. Please expand on that for us.
Well, Vic, these things aren't supposed to exist. We're told growing up that monsters aren't real. At least I was. And then when you see something that's not supposed to exist and you're trying to understand what it is you're looking at and grasp what it is you're looking at, it changes your perception on everything. It just does. Your perception on, I've been a very outdoor type person. I've enjoyed hiking, hunting, camping, you name it. I've pretty well done it. And when that occurs, when you see one, it changes your outdoor activities. At least it did for me for a long time.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. Yeah, up until you realized that these guys were out there, you were living a lie. And then all of a sudden, when that lie was revealed to you, yeah, it is going to change your paradigm. I mean, if dogmen are out there, what else is out there that we're told isn't out there? So that's totally understandable. It really is. Now that you realize that dogmen are a reality, most parents tell their children that monsters aren't real. But if you were to have a child tomorrow, or children, plural, after this point in time, once they got to be old enough to actually understand things that you were telling them, maybe not deeply, but somewhat understand the things that you were trying to relate to them about how the world works, are you of the mindset that it's a good idea to still tell them that monsters don't exist now that you know things like dogmen are out there, or would you tell them the truth?
Well, Vic, I have a 13-year-old son, and I told him that these things are real, that there are things out there that you won't understand, that you think that people say aren't real that actually are. My oldest children, they were around for my first encounter, and they have children of their own. I have grandchildren, so they know. And what they tell their children, I know a few of them have been told, the older ones, but I told them, at least my son, I always told him, I said, don't worry, everything's okay. Dad's the monster killer. It'll be okay. Don't be afraid when you go to sleep. Everything's all right. We're good.
Dad's the monster killer. I love that. That's great. When you told him the truth about all this, how did he respond?
Questions. Lots of questions. And the best I could do was, I live in the same area that I had my encounter. And he and I have walked that way many times. And I said, this is where it happened. Be cautious when you're outside. Be cautious when you're walking. Be cautious when you're playing with your friends. Don't go walking alone. He's got his, since it's kind of funny, his nephew is a year older than him. And they're like best friends. And they take walks together quite a bit. They go down to the local creek. And I've told them many times, I need to take your phone. You've got X amount of time, 20 minutes, I want you home. Half an hour, I want a phone call, whatever the case may be. And you don't veer from this path. This is what you do. This is where you go. And this is when you come back. And there's reasons I do that. Same thing with, summertime, they want to play hide and seek in the dark. And I'm like, nope, you guys aren't splitting up. None of you, because there might be 10 kids out there and they're all running around. And I'm like, no, let's not, don't give me any more gray hair than what I already have. Let's not do that. Let's just, stick to the yard. Let's not do it at night and go from there.
It's hard enough to raise children in this day and age. I can only imagine how much it's complicated doing that for you when you know the dogmen are out there. Kids are going to be kids. I don't need to tell you that. You already know that. Oh, yeah. But kids are going to be kids. They're going to want to go out and play hide and seek and play in the woods and all of that. We used to do that sort of thing and take it for granted, never a second thought. But now that dogmen are out there and you've got children that want to do those things, I can only imagine what you must go through. Like I said, it can't be easy.
It makes it tough some days, especially when they're really wanting to go out, or I go with them. You want to take a walk in the woods? Fine. Let's all go. And it's not as much fun because, Dad and Grandpa's there, but hey, you can go here, here, and here. I'll sit on the stump over here. Don't go far.
Yeah, well, it's understandable why you do that. You're just looking out for their well-being. It's totally understandable. Now, I'm glad that you told your youngest son about the reality of dogmen, but that's obviously some pretty heavy stuff to lay on a kid's shoulders who's that young. Was he compromised by that knowledge?
No. Growing up, I've always told him that even from a younger age, you have to understand that the world that we live in, sometimes it's not all about just what you see, it's what you don't see. So he's understood that. It's something that, just like growing up, I've seen black bear here. I've tracked a mountain lion for, I don't know, about a month or so. That being said, I've told him, you have to be aware of your surroundings, and that's it. Just be aware. If something doesn't feel right, that's your gut telling you that you need to leave and come home. If you don't feel comfortable, walking this path, don't go that path. Go another path, or just get home. Call me. I'll meet you. Always carry a phone with you. That's the number one rule. And don't go someplace that you're not familiar with. That's the best I can do.
Yeah, that's always really good advice, to be aware of your surroundings. You had your first encounter in the first week of December in 2005. Before that, though, did you even know what a dogman was?
Never heard of anything like that. No such thing. Never heard that term. Never thought for a moment that there was something like this out there. The first time I heard the term dogman was 2016 they had a Dogman symposium in Defiance, Ohio. And I went there and I met quite a few people. Linda Godfrey, Lyle Blackburn, Johnny L. Tenney, just to name a few, and got to listen to what their research had said. I actually called and talked to Linda a couple of different times. But up until then, never heard the term.
If you didn't even know about Dogman before that experience, then that made it have even more of an impact on you.
Yes, it did.
Oh, I'm sure. If you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. All right, Brian, please tell us about your encounters now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Just like you said, Vic, it happened in December 2005, the first or second week of December. It was cold in December, but we hadn't had much snow. Tracing maybe a little more, not much. My then wife and I were sound asleep, and our bedroom was on the back of the house and had French doors that opened out into the backyard. And I had a very large dog who was a wolf Malamute breed. And he was outside, and I was sound asleep. And I kept hearing this thunking noise. And I'm a light sleeper. And after hearing it a few times, I got up and I sleepily walked to the door and pulled the curtain back and looked out the door. And what I was hearing was him walking to the edge of his chain and thunking his chain. And he's never done that. Oh, okay. I got dressed, grabbed a big flashlight, spotlight. Like I usually do when I go outside at night, regardless, because I thought, well, maybe there's a stray dog or a coyote out there, which is possible where we live. I grabbed my 45 and tucked it in the back of my pants, and I walked out. And when I got out there, I turned on my big spotlight that I was carrying, and his hackles were up, his head was down, his tail was down, and he kept thunking that chain. And his name was Wolf, and I'm like, Wolf, what are you doing? And as I got over to him and tried to start petting him to try to get him to calm down, I heard this sound. It's something I will never forget, something I think about every single day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about that sound. And when that sound, it was, to the best way I could describe it back then, was like a renaissance howl from inside, like a barrel. It had that renaissance sound. Now, the town was just putting in new culverts, and some of them didn't have the tops on them yet. They were, working on this project. And I thought perhaps the dog got stuck down in one. Something happened. So I just started over to where I knew where it sounded like it was coming from. It was from where I was living at the time until, from the distance from where I was living to where the culvert I thought it was at, maybe 300, 350 yards, maybe a shade more. So I crossed the railroad tracks, and my parents, they lived right on the other side, and I cut down the side of their field until the field behind the house, and I started walking up the field, and I heard it again, and I thought, it doesn't sound like it's coming from over there. It sounded like it was coming from more directly in front of me. Now I was more curious because I'm like, unless they're in a barrel or something, what's making this sound? So I continued to walk until I got to the end of the one field. Now, the field that I had walked, there was a hill that was abreast of the top of it. I was at the top of this hill that went down into another smaller field, and then there was a side road. And the noise was coming from the woods. It's probably about 50, 60 yards from the road to the north, right in front of me. And I looked down at the 45 in my hand, and I'm like, this isn't big enough. It just something wasn't setting right. I just didn't feel as though that 45 was going to stop whatever it was, because I could tell then it wasn't a dog in a barrel, because I'm looking down at the neighbor or the mayor's husband kept 3 beagles, and they used those barrel houses at the time. It was a big thing back in the early 2000s, I guess. And it was dead quiet except for this howl. And the one dog was trying to dig through frozen ground to get under his barrel. And that's pretty much what made up my mind to go back and get something a little bit bigger. So I hustled back to the house, and I opened up my gun cabinet safe and I pulled out an HK-91, and on that rifle I had a night vision. Now, back then it was ATN, and it was a first gen. They worked better when there was ambient light. You could see better, but they weren't fantastic. But hey, it was civilian market, and that's what you could get. So I grabbed that, and when I opened up the cabinet and I grabbed the magazine, and my then wife woke up and asked me what I was doing. And I said, listen, there's something out there. And I said, I have no idea what it is, and I need to go find out. I said, this thing is not right. Something's not right. So she followed me out to the deck on the back of the house. And she goes, why are you going out here and doing this? I said, there's something out there, and I need to know what it is. I said, maybe it's an animal hurt. Maybe it's something else. I said, maybe someone's screwing around. That thing, it howled again. And she looked at me and said, oh my God, what is that noise? And she backed up to the house about to the door, and she slid down, and she goes, and she was from the city, Vic. She was born and raised in a large city. And when I told her where I lived, I said, no, you'll pass an Amish buggy, or you could. I said, the Amish are out here all the time. And sure enough, her first time out here, she passed an Amish buggy on the main road coming out to visit. So she had no idea. She wasn't, coyotes and, bears yelling or a cougar screaming. Those things aren't something that she was going to ever be used to. And I said, I'll be back. And I had a 1,000,000 power candle spotlight. And I started back to where I was at. I got there, and I went ahead and dropped down that hill, walked down there and walked across that field. I crossed the road, stepped over the ditch line, and walked past those dogs. So I'm about 30 yards maybe from the woods, and I'm just standing there, and I'm shining this light, kind of looking around, and I had if you know firearms, you hold on to these have a pistol grip on it with a stock. So I had it holding on to the pistol grip, and I had it kind of standing in the crook of my arm. And I'm just shining this spotlight, looking around and trying to figure out what that noise is. Well, then suddenly there was this sound of something tearing through the woods. I mean, it was just branches breaking. I could hear the trees just, the sound that the branches are snapping and softer branches moving. I dropped the spotlight, and I slammed the bolt shut on this rifle. Now, if you're familiar with this brand of rifle, this HK, the bolt that closes is on the opposite side. It's on the left-hand side. And when you hit it with your palm and it slams shut, it makes a pretty stout noise, especially when it's dead of night and there's no other noise that you can hear. Well, as soon as I did that, that thing stopped. Just stopped. It stopped running, stopped moving. And now I'm more curious because I'm like, okay, it recognized the sound of a bolt, but what is it? So I looking at the woods, I reached down and I picked that spotlight back up. And I just want to see what made the sound. What is this? Is there somebody running through the woods? Is someone screwing around? It sounded big. I'm like, I don't know. So I'm shining the flashlight, the spotlight, and having hunted and stuff, I'm looking about 4 feet off the ground, and I'm just shining that thing from left to right, and I get probably, I don't know exactly what angle it would be, probably 60 or 70 degrees from my center. And I thought, okay, that's not over there. I'm going to shine it back this way. And I started bringing it back from right to left. Well, I raised God knows what reason. I raised the spotlight up there toward the end. I kind of raised it up and was looking up in a tree in case something climbed up in a tree. And as I brought it back to almost dead center of me, there are these eyes. The best way to describe them is they're red. And they're staring right at me. 7, maybe a little over 7 feet tall. And I'm looking at something that should not exist. I'm watching it breathe. I see the steam coming out of its mouth, and it has this head, for better description, that looked like a large German Shepherd. I think I told you that the best way I could describe what I'm looking at was in the early to mid 80s. There was a show on TV called, I think it was Werewolf with Jack Palance. And that's what this head looked like. This thing is now, it's pushing down this branch of a pine tree with hands. I'm looking about from chest up, and it's locked gaze with me. It seemed like it was forever. It did. I'm looking at it. It's looking at me. I'm trying to decide and understand what I'm looking at. This shouldn't exist. I've been asked why I didn't shoot. Honestly, I never even thought about it. It wasn't even a thought in my mind to aim at this thing and shoot. There's no time to be afraid, but I'm just trying to understand what it is I'm looking at. I guess we probably locked eyes maybe 20 seconds. It turned its head to my left, its right. Now, from where it was standing, it was probably 30 yards of, flatter ground. Still got to go through the woods, some trees. And then it was all uphill from there, maybe 40 yards flat. It's probably 150 yards to the road. That thing turned and ran, unlike anything I'd ever seen before. It ran so fast, it hit that road within 5 seconds. I heard it hit the gravel. The gravel, some was frozen, some was new. And that's it. I didn't know what I was looking at. I had no idea what I had just seen or witnessed. After standing there for another minute or two, I turned around and headed home. I got home and I walked into the bedroom, and my then wife asked me, what was it? And I said, I honestly, I really don't know. I didn't know what I saw. I couldn't describe to her what I saw. And I said, I've got to go to sleep. I got to get up and go to work. I laid there the rest of the night just contemplating what I saw. The howling was something that I couldn't get out of my mind. And after a couple of weeks, I found the best thing at the time that I had to identify this thing as far as the noise, the howl. And she walked in, and she walked in through the back door. I was in the front door, or in the front room, the living room. And I told her, I said, just have a seat out there. And I said, tell me if this is about what we heard. It may be close. And I had stopped the movie right at the right spot, and I turned it on play. And she sat down, she goes, that's not it, but it's close. That was American Werewolf in London, where they were on the moors. It had that run of sound like that. So it was mid-January, and we were expecting, they had predicted a snowstorm. We were supposed to get quite a bit of snow, upwards of a foot, they said. And I took Wolf, and I had a 3-car garage, only 2 bays, which I used. The other bay I had a reloading shop in. And I spent a lot of time out there reloading different types of ammunition, mostly my own. And I took Wolf inside, and I had a bale of straw for him and put him in there and told him I'd see him in the morning. This was a Friday night. Well, Saturday morning rolls in, the sun had come out some. There's probably maybe 6 or 8 inches. A lot of times, these forecasters, they can either get it right or really wrong. Half right, I guess. And I said, well, I'm going to go out and get Wolf out and get him outside so he can do what he needs to do and go ahead and feed him. And I walked out the back door, and I stepped down the steps, and I got on the sidewalk because it's a detached garage. And I stopped because I'm looking at the side of the snow next to the garage. It's probably, 10 yards from me. And it's about 10 yards from me, and I'm looking at the side of this, and it's pressed down. The snow is pressed down. I don't know why that's like that. Well, as I started to take another step, I looked down, and there's these tracks in the snow. They were, 2.5 feet apart sideways. And it looked like an elongated dog track, but it was longer. And I'm like, what is this? So I got him out, and I took him out, and I went and got my neighbor. Now, my neighbor, he's a bit older than I was, and he had been a hunter himself. He came out, and he looked, he goes, I've never seen anything like that. Well, our local gun club I'm a member of, usually beginning of the year, they had a ODNR person come in. I knew the new game warden for the county in which I live. And he stood up there and was talking about some of the new stuff that was happening, introduced himself, passed out some cards. So I had one of his cards. I'd been talking to him afterwards, and I pulled his card out, and I called him up. He happened to be in the next town over, investigating a possible poaching. He said, well, give me a little bit and I'll be out. So he stopped out. And he walks up and he's looking, and he goes, I've never seen anything like this. He goes, I have no idea what this is. And he took a couple pictures, and we're standing there just talking. But what was interesting, as we turned around and we were looking at these tracks, they turned and went back to the railroad tracks, about maybe 35 yards away. But it was like it hopped from one foot to the next. They were 8 feet apart. One track, right side, next one, 8 feet apart, left side, right side, like it just hopped, like something would hop, like on its legs. After we said our goodbyes and Gary went home, I went in the house, and I went to the cabinet and grabbed that same rifle. I said, I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go track this thing. It went up on the tracks. I saw where they had got that snow, and when a train goes by, it kind of blows the snow out of where the train track is, and it kind of builds it up on the sides, and in between the two tracks there's more snow. But the snow itself on the tracks wasn't real deep, just a bit. And my son said, I want to go. And my oldest son, he was 12 at the time, I'm like, you sure? He goes, yep. I said, okay, come on, take a walk with Dad. So we walked down these tracks. Now, the tracks weren't real busy then. And he and I walked just about a mile. Could see different spots where you could see a print in the snow, whether it was to the side next to the rail or just in the stones between the rails, between the stone between the ties. And then it was gone. I lost it. And I don't know if it hopped off and into the woods that runs next to this railroad tracks. It maybe hopped off and ran in there. I have no idea, because it was just gone. it made me realize that this thing, as I'm walking back, this thing that night, to the best of my knowledge, it scented me. And because I'd been, I had taken the kids, there's that hill that's not far from, well, the same hill that I walked down when I heard that noise. My oldest daughter, she saw that track. And I remember that we went sled riding right after Christmas because I got new sleds for Christmas down that hill. And it was during the day. And I'm thinking, was this thing, was this thing watching us? I don't know. I have no idea. But I don't know if it kept my scent from that night or maybe picked it up since then. I have no idea. So I enjoyed camping. I loved to camp. It was 6 years before I went overnight camping again in the woods. Every time, my son and I, he liked to go in the woods. He and I would talk just about his day at school, his plans after school, just anything that he wanted to talk about. We'd go on a walk once a week just so he could tell me, his plans, his dreams, school things. But every time I went, I carried a gun and something big enough to get the job done. A 44 mag or bigger. It changes you. They want to go out. Even my older kids, they'd want to go out and do things, or they want to go, here's so and so. They want to go on a walk, or they're teenagers. They're going to go on a walk at night. They're going to go from point A to point B, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you guys can't. You may not like my answer, but you can't go. Not unless you want Dad hanging around. No. So why don't you invite your friends over and they can watch a movie or something? But how about just not going for a walk right now? It's something that it drives you. When I don't know how I heard about the Dogman Symposium in Defiance. I really don't remember how I heard about it. But I made sure that it was something that I was going to go to. And Defiance is, I don't know, probably hour and a half, 2 hours from where I live, maybe a little further. I don't recall anymore. And I went. And it was interesting listening to these researchers tell what they had found out and why they called it a Dogman. Linda Godfrey with the term the Michigan Dogman. Since that time, I have bought and read many books. I have many, many books on that subject. I have maps that I've created, coordinates, longitude, latitude of sightings. I have them pinned out, looking to see if there's any correlation to how they move, where they go. I know that people have thought, there's Indian mounds and some mounds that have never been, there's mounds that's been found nearby, so to speak, next county over. So that's nearby as far as I'm concerned. But, the town I live in, in a 5-mile radius from this town, there's cemeteries everywhere. Large ones, small ones, family plots. There's, I don't even begin to count how many. Probably 10 or more, maybe 12 within a 5-mile radius of where I live. And I know Linda Godfrey's train of thought, she was alive, was that, these might be a guardian of cemeteries, perhaps. Perhaps they travel routes that were because of Indians. And I know that we live in the 5 tribes area. So I don't know. I don't know what to think, only that I know that this thing was corporeal. I watched this thing breathe. I could see its chest moving. I could see the steam coming out of its mouth. I could see it looking at me. And that's something I will never forget. Since that time, I have not told that story personally to, up until a couple of years ago, to nobody. My family, close family. That's it. People are going to think you're crazy. A year and a half ago, I was given a terminal diagnosis. No cure, no treatment, just terminal. And I just wanted to make sure I told as many people as I could so they could decide for themselves whether they want to believe me or not. It's okay. Somebody told them. And that's what's important to me. We, in that time, since I've seen it, I have made it a goal to acquire the weapons needed should I have the ability to it seems like there's one that sticks around the area. That we have a lot of water and a big deer population, a lot of waterways, a lot of deer, rabbits, squirrels. And, we have farmers within 5 minutes of me walking out my back door, I could be in the woods in any direction. It's nothing but woods and farmland. And I thought to myself, having this diagnosis, would it be something that I would do to try to eliminate the one I've seen here? And that way maybe make it a little safer for those around me, especially my family. I have a flamethrower. You name it, I probably have it. I know nothing likes flames. I could go on and on and on. I told you about some of my plans and what I have. And not going alone, of course. Night times are now getting a little harder for me. So I might have to see if I can find someone else that would want to try out my plan. I'm probably not going to come up with anybody, but it's worth a try. In the last year, last summer, it was August, my son, who's 13, wanted to do a little bit of fishing. The gun club's just a little walk from here, not too far. And it was early evening, 6:30, 7 o'clock maybe. I said, okay, sure. So we walked up there. Around the gun club pond, there's a 6-foot chain link fence with a locking gate. That's something that's required that they have. We went in and we were fishing. And don't know why I did not take a firearm with me. We're just going fishing. And I had my back to the field, looking back toward the range. My son was standing near the dock that was there. Now, behind me to my left, they had put in a windmill that generated the air for as it pumped air underneath the water to help the fish. And I knew where the line was that was coming under the water, so I'm reeling in kind of slow because I don't want to snag anything. Next thing you know, I hear this noise. He throws his fishing pole down and he runs. He sprints over to me. Dad, 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 Dad. And I'm like, what? He goes, did you see it? Did you see it? I said, see what? I had my back to the field. I said, he goes, you didn't hear that sound? I said, well, yeah, I heard the sound. He goes, Dad, I think I saw what you saw. Well, I started to interrogate him. Wait. What did you see? I said, you see a deer? no, I didn't see a deer. I said, are you sure it wasn't a deer? He goes, Dad, this thing looked like a giant dog. He said, a really big dog, bigger than any dog I've ever seen. And he goes, it was kind of running. He goes, it was so fast. He goes, it was there, then it was there, then it was there. Now, the distance he was covering was maybe 125 yards, maybe 150. He goes, it was fast. He goes, it was there, there, and there. And he goes, it was just so fast. And he goes, it wasn't running on all fours all the time. He said it was kind of like running half bent over and half on its fours, and it would stand back up kind of. And he goes, I'm scared. And I said, okay. I said, here, I opened up the gate and locked the gate. And I said, come out here and stand, get in the car, just get in the car. He goes, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to go over here. You saw it next to this wood line. I said, I'm going to go just have a look. No. I said, I've got to go have a look. And like I said, I didn't have a gun. I said, where did it go in at? Oh, right there at that point. I'm like, okay. So I walk over. The ground's hard. There's no tracks that I can see anywhere. And I'm like, and he's white. He's pale, I should say. Not much color in his face. And I get over to the edge of the wood line and I look inside and I'm looking. And you know how you see something for a split second and then it's gone? Well, that's what happened. I'm looking into the woods, this like a large fence line. And I'm looking through the back, and it's just from behind a tree. I see something, and then I'm looking at it, and I blink, and it's gone that quick. So we get back up to the house, and he comes running up the stairs, and he told my fiance what he saw. And she's looking at me, because I've had the discussion with her what I've seen. Well, a few days later, she was taking care of, she's a nurse. She worked ICU. She worked on a MICU truck, mobile intensive care unit. She worked at hospice. This woman can do anything she sets her mind to. She's extremely intelligent. And she'd been taking care of a very medically fragile child that's 2 that had a heart transplant. And it was dark, like 9:30, 10 o'clock-ish maybe, when she got home. And she walked up the stairs and walked in the house. And she's looking at me, and she is completely pale, no color. And she's shaking. Her hands are shaking. She's shaking. And she looks at me and she goes, I saw it. And I looked at her and I said, you saw what? She goes, I saw that thing. I said, what thing? I wanted her to be specific. She goes, I saw that Dogman thing. And she goes, I always believed you, but she goes, when you see it, it's totally different. She goes, I was just about a mile and a half from where we live. There's a bridge that had been redone, I don't know, a few years ago. And she was crossing that bridge, 2-lane highway, it's the main road that runs through town. And she goes, something stepped out in the road, and she goes, I could see it. And she goes, it walked slower as it got to the guardrail. And she goes, it looked wet. She goes, it looked, here's this wolf standing on, this big, straggly looking wolf thing standing by the guardrail. And she goes, I came to an almost stop looking at this thing. And she goes, it looked at me. I'm looking at it. It's looking at me. I'm catching its eyes. And she goes, it hopped over the guardrail. That's a 25-foot drop. And she goes, I came right home. And she goes, I was praying to God that it didn't follow me. So when something like that happens, I've had people say, well, I'll believe it when I see it. And my response to them has always been, I hope you never see it then. I said, I hope you don't see it, because it'll change your perception on everything, on reality, on what you believe is real and not real, what you feel is safe when you're out. If you do a lot of, again, very rural area, a lot of people like to hunt or take walks in the woods or go camping. It will change what you know. So you can either take my story and you can believe it, which is fine. And I hope that if you do, you just take precautions. That's it. Just take precautions. And if not, I hope you never see one, and that's okay. So Vic, that's been my story. I'm not sure where you'd like me to go from here.
Well, normally at this point, I would just dive in and start asking you a bunch of questions, but I know you're not feeling all that well right now, so here's what I'd like to do. Okay. Would you be okay if we just planned on coming back maybe at the end of the week here, and I just asked you all these questions in? We had a show this Friday evening, if you feel up to it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm starting to feel a little just drained. But I would love to answer any questions you have. Like I said, this is something that I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't think about it. If it does, it's because something else has happened that's been traumatic enough at that day where that's occupied my mind. But usually when I lay down to go to sleep, it crosses my mind. So, yeah, we can try Friday. I mean, it should be okay.
Well, let's do that then. I totally understand. Yeah, if something happens traumatic enough where you don't think about the Dogman experiences because of the trauma from whatever happened during the day, I can only imagine how traumatic it must have been to keep your mind off all this. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, every day is a new day, so you can never be too sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
Yes, sir.
Well, Brian, having said all that, I can't thank you enough for your time. Yeah, please do go relax and try to take it easy. And yeah, I'll just coordinate back with you to record part 2, the Q&A, and we'll just take it from there then.
Sounds good, Vic. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for yours, and try to have a good night.